I'm Insomniac, and this is the Vostok-Europe Almaz space station.
Oh, yo!
Insomniac.
Okay, well, before I dive into this review, I'm not actually sure if I said the name of this right. It's either Almaz, I don't know, A-L-M-A-Z. But that is the name of the watch. It's in the title, of course, and in the spec screen. A huge shout out to Jim Berry for sending this in. He has been basically the sole provider of watches to be reviewed on this channel. Very much appreciate it. Speaking of which, if you have any watches you'd like to see me review on this channel, email me at shoulditimethis@gmail.com. I will tell you where to send them. They will be reviewed, insured, and sent back. Okay, well, let's have a little fun and dive into the watch. The first thing you'll notice about this case, besides its massive size, is the fact that it's bronze, and according to the manufacturer, it's not a bronze color. The case and bezel minus the case back are actually bronze. The machining is good quality, the polish is nice, and the lugs are short with a quick curve, which does help create a slightly more comfortable situation on the wrist, despite the fact that it's a gigantic diameter and far too tall. Case back is stainless steel and has information about the watch engraved into it, including the production number. Apparently there are 3,000 of these made, and this one is number 1229. In the center you have a cool engraving of the Almaz space station, or however you say it, which is what the series was named after. The bezel on this piece is unidirectional, and while there really isn't much grip to it, there's definitely enough to easily turn the bezel if your hands are dry. Operation of the bezel is pretty good, and it has a stable overall feel with only a little bit of play between clicks. Last, we have the crown and pushers. Crown on this watch is a large screw-down type and has very good grip. I'm surprised that a limited production watch in this price bracket doesn't have some kind of engraving or design on the face of the crown, but overall, it looks pretty good with this case. The pushers for the chronograph are bronze like the rest of the case. They have a great solid feel to them and a very positive click when engaging or disengaging the chronograph. Overall, it's a nice case. My only personal complaint is the size. The dial on this watch is excellent. Not perfect, but we'll get to that complaint in a minute. Let's start with all the good. The base for this dial is a flat black backing, which really makes all of the white and bronze pop. You have lume-filled applied hour markers with angled polished bronze borders, an easy-to-read printed minute track in between the hour markers with a great length to the minute lines to distinguish those from the smaller printed 5th second track around the outer edge of the dial. The text at 3 and 9 is well done and is just the right size for the dial. At 12 o'clock you have a large, slightly recessed, easy-to-read minute track for the chronograph, while at 6 o'clock you have an equally sized, recessed running second sub-dial done in bronze with a nice concentric circular pattern with black printing, which adds a great contrast to the dial overall. At the bottom of that sub-dial you have the date window, which I love here. It's comfortably placed, and because it's integrated into the second sub-dial, it isn't stuck somewhere randomly on the dial, potentially throwing off the balance of such a solid design. Last, we have the hands. First of all, every hand on this dial is the perfect length for its respective dial, reaching out to the outer edges of the minute track and sub-dials. The minute and second hands for the chronograph, as well as the running second hand at 6 o'clock, are all done in this really cool blue, which matches the Vostok logo accent really well as the stitching on the band. And they add a really cool vibrant touch to the dial without being overdone or cheesy. The main hands for the time are broad sword-shaped hands done in a polished bronze with large amounts of lume filling in their centers, while the other 3 hands are finely done stick-style hands, all with rectangular counterbalances. Really great handset on this dial. My only complaint about the dial design is actually the chapter ring that runs above the printed minute and 5th second track on the main dial, because other than the printed 5-minute intervals, it's just a redundant mirrored track to the minute and 5th second track on the main dial, which is not only unnecessary, but it's the only bit of unnecessary clutter on this dial. Now, from a balance standpoint, I understand why they did it. The height of the case is out of control tall, and without that printed track out there, the chapter ring would just look sparse, but it's just not necessary. Other than that, though, great dial. There are 2 usable complications on this watch, the first being the main complication, the chronograph. The pushers are very responsive, the look of the chronograph when it's in action is very solid, and the hands for the second and minutes are very easy to read in their stopped positions due to the fine thinness of the hands and the excellent printing and legibility of the minute and second tracks. My only minor complaint with the chronograph is that the 5th second track is useless because if you observe the movement in action, you'll see that the second hand for the chronograph is actually counting 4 beats per second, not 5, so it's counting quarter seconds, not fifth seconds. The only other complication is the date at the bottom of the dial. As stated in the dial section, I love the placement of the date window, and the white printing on the black disc is the perfect match to the rest of the dial aesthetically. And although the numerals are small, they're printed well and easy to read at a quick glance. The lume on this watch is excellent. Vostok uses Super Luminova for the lume fillings here, including inside the hour and minute hands, inside all of the hour markers, and in the bezel marker at 12. There's a large surface for all lume filled areas. The lume glows brightly and evenly under a direct charge, and even in standard light to dark applications, such as going from a bright room out into the dark, the lume picks up a decent charge. Definitely good enough to be able to tell the time in the dark. My only slight complaint here is that the lume doesn't last as long as it does on some other watches with a similar application. Other than that, great lume. Time at a glance on this watch is excellent. The hands are long and have great fine points to them. Contrast is excellent with bronze and lume-filled hands over the black dial with white markers and blue hands over the black and bronze subdials. It's very easy to tell the exact time at a glance on this watch. Accuracy with this watch is what you'd expect from a well-made Japanese quartz movement. After a week since setting the watch, the time hasn't gained or lost any noticeable ground, so it's perfectly accurate. And what's even better than that is the second hand. If you're used to watching my reviews, you hear me complain constantly about how deadbeat second hands either look sprungy when they stop at each second or don't line up with most of the second indices. But the white-tipped blue hand in the second subdial not only looks crisp with each stop, but it lines up exactly dead on with each index on that subdial. Very impressive look to the movement. The strap on this watch is very good, partially because of the quality, which I'll talk about in a second, and partially because dimensionally it's exactly right for the size of the case on this watch. It's the right width and aesthetic to complement the case, and the strap is really thick, which helps visually balance out that monster thickness of the case. Speaking of thickness, it's thicker than most leather watch straps, but I found it to be pliable and comfortable anytime I had it on the wrist. In terms of quality, the finish of this strap looks perfect with the bronze case and perfectly matched and sized buckle. The blue stitching adds a really cool sporty element to the overall look on the wrist, and just like with the blue accents on the dial, it isn't overdone so it doesn't come off cheesy. And the free loops on this strap actually hold the excess strap length in place with minimal slip, regardless of where you set the adjustable loop. It's the kind of strap that I rarely come across where I can say that I actually wouldn't change it out for something better suited, because personally I don't think there is a strap out there that would complement this watch better than this one. And last we have value. As of the time of this review, this watch was listed on Amazon for $729. Now I know what most of you are thinking, a quartz chronograph for over $700? You can actually buy good mechanical chronographs for that money and less, which is true. And if that was your reaction, I'm not going to sit here and say that it wasn't justified, because would I personally spend over $700 on this watch? No, but it really comes down to two factors. One, do you like a large watch? You have to keep in mind that this is 47 millimeters. However many millimeters I had in the specs tall, it's very tall. And even though, like I said, it was fairly comfortable on the wrist, if you have a smaller sized wrist or even an average sized wrist like mine, it's gonna look fairly ridiculous. And two, do you collect Vostok watches? Part of the immediate value of this watch is the fact that it's a limited production watch. They're only making 3,000 of them. Once they sell out, that's it. You can't get one. Of course, the big question there is whether this particular watch is going to really become quote-unquote collectible in the future, whether or not it's going to go up in value, and I'm not an expert in this particular brand, so I honestly don't have an answer for that. But if you like the aesthetic of this watch and you're into Vostok pieces, the fact that this is limited production does make it a little bit safer bet that it will be worth your money or give you some type of return on investment as opposed to just a general production watch that you spent $700 on. So long story short, if you exclude the possibility of it being worth more in the future, because again, I can't really speculate on that, do I think this watch is worth $700? No. But at the same time, it's definitely not grossly overpriced because it is a very good quality piece. Very solid build quality, minus the dimensions, a very handsome aesthetic. You have useful complications that work well. The movement looks good. It's very accurate despite the fact that it's a quartz drivetrain. So at this price, it's a decent value overall. And I guess I could add a point for the speculation of possible collectivity in the future. Again, a big shout out to Jim. Thank you very much for sending this in to be reviewed. I appreciate it. If you're enjoying these reviews and you'd like to support the channel, there is a Should I Time This Patreon page. Link at the top of the video description down below. I have some cool rewards set up. And of course, it would help me get out a lot more content a lot quicker. I will see you all in the next one.